All the way live from the UK, so you will be able to ask him questions at the end. So Eddie Townsend is an award-winning press, public affairs and communications professional currently working as Director of Communications and Campaigns at the London Borough of Waltham Forest. Eddie has 23 years' experience in high-profile communications roles in organisations such as Metropolitan Police, Home Office, Action Fraud and the European Parliament, as well as the Government Olympic Communications Department during the London Olympic Games in 2012. He's worked on some of the most high-profile and controversial media handling issues of modern times, including the London riots, terrorist attacks, Operation U-Tree, which is following the Jimmy Savile revelations, as well as led in the UK's policing's response to the growth in cybercrime and fraud. Oh my gosh, you like them action-packed. So here we are, Eddie, talking to us about driving long-term advancement in the community by leveraging campaign milestones for future communications.
Wow, that's quite an introduction. Thank you for that. It's always odd when other people talk about your career, but yes, most of those were fascinating incidents. But I'm here to talk to you about how you can drive citizen satisfaction and trust through a very long-term approach, and some of the things that you can take from any organisation from this. And just to give you an indication, this plan was formulated in 2019. So once again, communications it's a long-term approach, and taking that approach and not changing it. And I'll show you today how you can do that to actually create citizen satisfaction and trust. And those two things are indelibly linked. I'll give you an example of an award-winning campaign that illustrates this approach, and then I'll go through some data to illustrate what the impact of that has been. And then if I've got time, I will I'll answer some questions, but talk about some of the tactics we've used and how making sure your team also reflect that approach as well. So obviously I'm speaking to a foreign audience, so knowing your audience context is important. So Waltham Forest is a borough in northeast London of approximately 278,000 people. London is split up into 33 London boroughs, all the way from Camden, Islington, some of the names that you would recognise. But what does a London borough do? So we own and maintain nearly 500,000 homes across London. That's 1 in 7 homes. So we are a landlord. We do lots of other things. So we run libraries, we deal with planning applications, we deal with the waste, the pubs, the licensing, the museums, we own hotels. We own many things that you would find. So for everything from graveyards to roads to the lampposts, everything is largely owned by a local authority or council, as some people would call them. Now, context is also important in terms of finances. So following the financial crash, the budgets of London boroughs and councils were hugely cut. And to give you a context, just Waltham Forest alone had to make savings of £120 million. And that's important in terms of how an organisation runs and how it can function. But one of those things that what we did here in Waltham Forest to try to make sure that we could still meet that is have an adult conversation with residents. But to illustrate that issue of those savings, we've currently got another 3,300 employees across 120 services. Before the financial crash, we had 4,300 staff. So that illustrates the savings and the cuts that have had to be made. But at the same time, satisfaction has gone up, which is, as you can imagine, quite a challenge. So how would you go about doing that? So Waltham Forest, it's all made up of different areas, and actually it has traditionally been quite a deprived area. So 317 local authorities or councils in England. 10 years ago, that Waltham Forest was the 5th poorest of those 317. It is currently 82nd poorest. So it has actually gone through a steady gentrification, is what some people call it, but it has gone through a prosperity boom over that period, and it is continuing in that process as well. But it is being London, and for those people, I'm sure many of you have travelled to London, it is a very diverse area. So over 53% of people are from minority ethnic backgrounds. Top 6 countries of origin are Romania, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, Lithuania, and Pakistan. So you can see that the international flavour of this borough, and that brings challenges, but it also brings massive opportunities. So that gives you an illustration of what this borough is like. And actually, it's a very young borough as well. So the average age, I think, it's about 36 which against a national average of about 44. So it's a young, vibrant place, constantly changing. And just to illustrate how much it is changing is 20% of people move every year. So that's 1 in 5 people move about every year. And that's the porous nature of borders and across London and internationally as well. So it does bring challenges for communications, but that's a lot of data. I will share with you some of the people from this borough, just to illustrate, and I promise you, you will know at least one of these people. I'm sure you will. So historically, William Morris, a firebrand and historic textile expert. Now, if you don't know William Morris, you will know some of his designs. We actually have a museum that we run in London of that very thing. Alfred Hitchcock. Anyone who has ever watched a film, particularly from the 1960s and 70s, and he is quoted as one of, Steven Spielberg said, the greatest director that ever lived. Benjamin Disraeli, who was a radical prime minister in the 19th century. But that gives an illustration. It's a creative place traditionally, and it is also a left-wing place as well. There is a lot of left-wing and radical politicians that have come from here. Now, that's very historical, but I'm sure some of the modern ones as well. So David Beckham was born and raised in the borough. Harry Kane, currently England captain, he was also raised in the borough. And for any music fan who was around in the 90s or the noughties, Damon Albarn of Gorillaz and Blair fame. I'm hoping at least one of those people you will have heard of, but they were all born and bred in this borough. And it is known as an area where people come here and creative, and there is obviously a sport feeling as well, but music is key to this area as well. So that's understanding the place that we're talking about today. Now, so I wanted to talk to you about one of our campaigns, which was a Choose Local campaign. And I put the date here very deliberately because in April 2020 is when we kicked off this campaign. Now, April 2020 for many people, probably in Australia, it was slightly different, but very similar time, is the beginning of the pandemic. So we had a meeting with the chief executive and the leader of our council, because there is a political arm to our organisation, and sat down and decided, had a conversation about what the priorities would be for our residents. Now, there's some of that, a lot of that wasn't data-based. That was trying to understand that a lot of people would be home, they would be spending more time in the local area, because being an outer London borough, a lot of people commute into central London for work and commute elsewhere, so that their home is here, but most of their working life will be elsewhere. And that was turned upside down overnight because of the restrictions put in by government. So we knew that what we needed to do, and we knew that businesses would be struggling, even those ones that were staying open, government regulations, etc. So we decided what we needed to do was educate all residents about the businesses that made up the borough, particularly small businesses. So 98% of our businesses are 15 staff members or less. So it's a micro business community. And what we wanted to do was actually educate people about what those businesses were, what they did. But as we all know, as communications professionals, are the most important in that human element, making everything about people. And the biggest advocate of anything can be the human voice. Not any organisation talking about how great they are, but the actual businesses in the community reflecting back what they wanted to hear. So in April 2020, what we did was start this campaign called Choose Local, Support Everyone. Now, why was that also important? So we had 4 key objectives of this campaign: promote the local community, grow that civic pride, something that was uniquely Waltham Forest, and everything we ever do has to be uniquely Waltham Forest, because even though the UK is a small country, our residents can tell if the place isn't the right place or it's somewhere else, and they can tell if it's not our residents. Now, also what we want to do, revitalise our high streets and town centres. We saw the pandemic as an opportunity because obviously with the Amazons of this world and the massive out-of-town shopping centres, we know the high street was struggling. This was an opportunity to reconnect with those high streets and revitalise them. We put some money in behind that to do that. And we wanted to connect people with jobs. Those businesses that were still open, we knew were busy. So actually we could promote their jobs as well as part of this campaign and actually use their channels. And in the end, we had over 900 channels that were actually pumping out content about this campaign itself. And obviously, as we always want to do, grow the council's reputation with businesses and residents so that they could be proud of the organisation and that we could serve them. So that's basically the objectives we put together. But also there was data as always you use. So 91% of residents said supporting businesses should be a council priority. Now that's obviously an obvious thing, but one of the important things is for every £10 spent in an independent business, so that's an independent local business, £3.80 is retained locally. On the opposite end of that, if you shop at Amazon or any of the other things, next to nothing is actually retained locally. So what if you're going to have a thriving house street, if you're going to have a thriving jobs market, we do need to promote locally, and we need to tell residents about the benefits of shopping locally as well. And Londoners are but actually the background to London, for those that know London, Londoners are the most likely to shop local because we do still have thriving high streets. But so it wasn't something that had died, it was something that was struggling but not died yet. And obviously, how do we get those messages across? Understanding all our channels. So the one thing that we always do in our communication, obviously our channels are important, but if you wait for people to come to you to talk, it's not the way we want to go. Know your audience. Where are they talking? One of the key things we've done throughout the years is actually map all the social media channels about where residents are actually talking. So for example, I'll give you a clear example of that, Facebook. So we know we've mapped the 80 largest Facebook groups in the community, and we actually put content out there to those administrators. We put that into those groups, so we don't wait for people to talk to us. But we do have a lot of our channels that we also use. I mean, you could obviously pay for a lot of social media, but that's going to be expensive over time. So actually creating content and getting people to put it out there. And if you use the community to actually talk, that's what they'll do. They'll actually want to put content out that it reflects the community you want to serve and actually the priorities that they want you to tackle anyway. So obviously the trust of the channels is important, and we've been building that over time as well. So one of the things, what was the kind of tactics, the campaign legacy? The strapline creates a sense of unity and commonality. Eat, drink, enjoy, repeat. Choose local, support everyone. So the bit going back to that point around, if that money is retained locally, we support everybody. So if you look at the data, making sure the message reflects that. And it's about having a self-sustained and owners business community. One of the great things about this campaign was the business community owned it. It wasn't us pumping it out. It wasn't us keep banging on about what message it was. There was over 900 channels pumping content and having regular user-generated content that targeted the campaign and actually increased the knowledge by 50% of what people understood about local businesses. So those little gems in their local community, they had no knowledge about. And actually, one of the great indicators for some of the support this work is pre-pandemic to post-pandemic unemployment actually went down only 5%, whereas in other London boroughs it went down by somewhere in the region of 10%, just indicating that actually understanding people's local businesses they can support and want to champion those businesses. And it's creating that clear link between local action and wider impact. I know that I feel good because I am supporting my local businesses, my local community, and creating that sense of community is so vitally important, particularly during a pandemic. So obviously we use the full marketing mix, use generated content. One of the things we did was Tuesday, which is a mouthful at first thing in the morning, which it is here, gave our audience a focus. So there was 968 resident suggestions on one single week. So what that generated content, it also generated actually conversations about which the best local businesses were. And obviously some of those were the obvious food ones, pubs, but also those local independent businesses as well, those convenience stores and all those businesses that people used on a very daily basis. And it actually, what we did was, we actually got some of the content. So they talked about some of the characters in these businesses, and we went to all those characters and started doing promotional content and videos that actually talk to the personalities of these communities as well, so that we can actually get more user-generated content. So one of the tactics we've also been adopting over the last 2 years is to map those influencers. So those business community influencers is one key audience that we've been developing, but we've done that further. So for example, we opened a new cultural venue recently. And what we did across Instagram and across Twitter and Facebook was map those influencers in the cultural sector as well. Who are those people saying, oh, we should go here? Who are those mums networks who are talking about where to take their kids? So that we could actually contact those people and give them content to put out on their channels, so we're not waiting for people to come to us or pay for expensive social media content. So that's some of the tactics that we used, but all the full marketing mix was used as part of this campaign. So what was the impact? What was all those tactics, and what have we done? So actually we're in the fourth phase of this campaign, so it's actually still going. But one of the things that we've done is actually making it more localized and hyper-local, but I'll come to that. So 95% of people who saw the campaign were persuaded to choose local, which is obviously a campaign survey. But one of the things was we also saw from pre-pandemic to in the middle of the campaign, an 8% increase in households actually choosing local, which equates to about 8,800 households, which basically equates to money. So if 8,800 households actually spend £100, that's £1 million injection into the local economy. And actually some of those businesses have seen real growth that we highlighted, particularly at the beginning of the campaign. And it actually didn't actually cost the organisation that money, but it does benefit us through business rates. So you can actually make a return on investment by showing some of the impact of these things on the business community itself, because obviously we get rates back from those businesses in taxes as well. So so that's some of the impact. So the other thing what we did was obviously continue learning. We need to never start a campaign just thinking, be rigid about what the approach is. We listened to not just the business community, but residents as well. And we talked at length throughout the period of the campaign to people about what they wanted to see. We're not the complete holder of every idea under the sun. We can always pick people's ideas. So 90% of local businesses said they wanted the campaign to be expanded and localized. And actually what we did was, so through some of the grants and funds that went to the business community, and actually our business community forum decided they wanted to fund the campaign in the second and third phase. So actually we haven't put any extra money in since the first phase of the campaign, because the business community wanted it so much. And residents told they were more likely to choose local if it was localized to their area. So as everyone knows, where do you feel connection in terms of your shopping in your community? Is your hyper-local area, that's high street in your local area, is the one that you want to champion. Bill, who works in the shop, they want you to champion their very local area. So rather than have a borough-wide campaign, we now have one that for those very small local communities from Walthamstow, Leighton, Leytonstone, and Chingford. So because that's what people wanted, and that's what we reflected in the second and third phases of this campaign. And use the insight from phase one to evolve the Tuesday target advertising and refining the message and linking to milestones. And actually we got some residents actually trying out some of those businesses and then putting content out with all the kind of hashtags and channels and questioning throughout the campaign. But we did that as part of the second and third illustration. And actually now we're going to do a business community awards, which is actually from the campaign as well. So that gave it another arm. Real impact to businesses though. So just to illustrate, so Square Root Soda, which you'll have seen in some of the images you'll have seen in this campaign, saw revenue increase by 15% and gave 5 new suppliers across the campaign dates. So that's a business that started in 2018, so not long before the actual pandemic hit. 480 businesses took our business support package, which actually brought revenue into the organisation. So that's about marketing packages. We give business packages as well. An 8% increase on that provision that actually brought in money, more money than actually the campaign cost. So there was a return on investment. And obviously, some of the campaign won awards, and actually that gave promotion to some of the businesses as well. Because rather than us going to the awards, we sent the businesses, because those are the people, the real champions and the real actual voices of this campaign. So that they won some of the campaigns and actually got some of the business, and they're going to get more media coverage than, say, if I went, for example. So don't just hear from me, here's one of our participants of the campaign.
It greatly increased the exposure of the shop to a borough-wide audience. Moved out of Hines Park, our local area, to other areas of Waltham Forest. The community support has been absolutely fantastic. We've actually widened that support because of the campaign, because our exposure went borough-wide. So it went out of Hines Park and 2 areas of Walthamstow, Leighton, Chingford, And we have seen repeat custom from these new customers over the last year and a half. But I don't think we could have asked for better support from the local council, to be honest.
So thanks for Delroy for that. So what did this do? It challenged and it changed. So it changed the conversation, certainly with our business community. And you'll see on the right-hand side here, we actually did till receipts in every business in the community so that we could actually get that message out about the campaign and actually promote the local business and why you shop locally as well. So it builds across other council priorities and using that. So we've been using this as an approach with the business community particularly, but it's now become a campaign that's owned by the business community that we advise on, but actually we don't get involved that much other than producing artwork and content for them. And it helped build our channels as well. And it goes back to that satisfaction and trust, which I'll come back to in a very short time. So what is our communications approach? So these are the 4 key tactics that I talk to my team about on a regular basis. We all do great campaign plans, etc., but we need to have a channel strategy. If you're not building your audience, you're not building your influencing powers. And I talked about those influencers as well. It's not just about what you're doing on your own channels, it's how you're also engaging and influencing the channels that your target audience are on as well. And that's obviously we use insight into the heart of communication strategies, but it's the right insight as well. It's not all insight. You need to cherry pick what insight you're actually using, depending on how you're trying to target your audience. Clarity, being clear about the offer, and also being brand clarity as well. Most residents in our borough will come in contact with our brand 3 or 4 times, maybe a month. So it's making sure that you are getting the credit and making sure everything is as clear and as simple as possible. The best communications are simple and easy to understand. When we overcomplicate it, that's when mistakes are made. Reflecting Waltham Forest at all times. We must reflect the community we serve. And actually, during the pandemic, obviously, central government is wanting you to put communications across your channels about blah, 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 and blah. One of the things that we did, actually, to the anger of some of our central government colleagues, was we reframed all the photos. We put images on all their communications because people from Buckinghamshire or Liverpool or Manchester don't look like Waltham Forest, and our residents know that. And actually, they've told us that as well, that our communications should always reflect the people of this borough at all times. So that's one of the simple tactics we've used. And challenging how a council sounds and looks. So there's nothing worse than something you go, that looks council. So we always try to challenge and get the best from our designers and our content as well, but they always try to be image-led. That's what we always try to do, because it creates that sense of community, reflecting back the people of the place, because we know as human beings, we trust the people that are in our local community. And prioritizing. As I've always said throughout my career, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And that is one of the biggest challenges, that everything, when you're in an organization that runs 120 services, how do you prioritize? And that is about sometimes relationships with your top team as well, and sometimes having difficult conversations, but it is really, really important. So build the audience. I've just talked to one key element of this. So one of the things we've been doing since the 4 years I've been here is building that audience. So for example, our newsletter database, which started from 0 back in 2018, we've now got 180,000, which for a local community ours, that's 2/3 of the adult population. And that's been built over time through various tactics. But we have our own newspaper, which is quite controversial, having a newspaper from a local authority, but it enables us to talk to the very people who may not be digitally savvy, may not be particularly wealthy, but the very people actually that our services need to talk to. And actually that goes through every household in the borough. It's quite expensive, but you can obviously get advertising, and actually in the end it brings a revenue. Social media. So we benchmark against other London authorities about followers and content, but making that engaging content, and go where your audience is on social media, map those communities where your audience is actually talking. And obviously the engagement arm as well. So particularly through the pandemic, we've got an army of about 1,500 volunteers who we actually on a monthly basis communicate messages to, who can be our advocates in the community. And we've been building those people, those volunteers for a long, long time. So that's something else that we do. So, and also be data driven, but that's building your audience. So what does this mean? So how has satisfaction been rising? What does this mean? How do residents feel about the organisation and our communications? So 4/5, 80% of people agree the council does well at keeping residents informed, and that is about comms. That's about how are we communicating? And there is a direct correlation between people being well informed about what you're doing to being satisfied about what you're doing. If they don't know what you're doing, they can't be satisfied, and the polar opposite as well. And obviously, one of the things comms should always be as an advocate for residents. The best communications professionals sit half in and half outside an organisation. So making sure that the chief executive, the leader, understand what the priorities are for residents, and we can use lots of data to prove all those things. And we have a comms panel where we test all our content as well. But so 76% agree the council acts upon those concerns of local residents. And if you look at the benchmarks in the bottom left-hand corners, you'll see what the industry sector average is. So, for example, benchmark 57% is the average in local authorities for keeping residents informed. So we are performing well above the benchmark. Satisfaction, the ultimate performance indicator. There's nothing more about championing the borough, but championing staff as well. Greater recognition of volunteers and residents. And so this is just one of the campaigns we're currently doing as well. And this, as you'll see with the previous campaign and this campaign, we always like positivity. We like colour. We like vibrancy. We want something that doesn't look government, does not look council. So this I'm just going to illustrate something else we're doing. And actually, this is an interesting campaign because this is about free events. So we know there's a cost of living crisis, which has caused, for example, heating and electricity bills to go up by 60% in the UK, and we know they're going to go up again, and people are really struggling. So, for example, we run 5 food banks in the borough, and 11,000 of our residents are using food banks on a regular basis. That's how bad it is. But you won't see the words food banks or poverty here. This is about free events. But at each of those free events, we have people from our support team talking about what support is available and what people can do to get support in terms of government funding or extra support that can be available from citizens' advice, etc. So we're using these vibrant events. These are all free events. So and those people that we can get the support to there. But we're not talking about poverty. We're getting people to events and then talking to them about how they can get the support that they so desperately need, because we know that that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear about poverty reduction because that's not what they're engaged the content with. So I have talked at length, so I think it's now the time for anyone with questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eddie. What a fantastic presentation, and thanks for waking up so early in the morning there. Audience first, are there any questions? Yes, we have one up here. Thanks, Mary.
I think that's really cool. I was really impressed by that. My question's not so much about the campaign, but on that Instagram, on those Instagram figures, there's quite a lot of East London at the top of that. Tower Hamlets, Newton was near the top. What do you think's behind that? Is there something special in East London when it comes to Insta?
Well, if you know Instagram, obviously our audience the average age is about 25 to 40 are the key people. There's a key gloss of people using Instagram in that community. You'll also see, I talked right at the beginning of the presentation that we're a younger borough than the average. East London, across that kind of patch that you just talked about, that the average age is much younger. So you would expect probably a glut of people in that age group that probably use Instagram as well. But obviously, it's not universal. You will see some of the East London boroughs. So, for example, Havering probably don't even have an Instagram account. So that you know what I mean. But you're right. There is the lower age group. There is a glut of those people in East London because, for those that know London, Shoreditch, Hackney, Waltham Forest, Walthamstow, etc., is a young, vibrant community, and there is a lot of the younger age population here. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Eddie.
I have a question for Eddie. How do you measure satisfaction? How do you collect your data, and what are your criteria?
So we use the local government guidance on satisfaction, which is collected by the Local Government Association. It's got to be a representative sample. We do face-to-face basically, are you satisfied with your council? We do that 3 times a year so that we can understand, and actually because the world is so chaotic, actually, we're seeing more of a change over that period. So 3 times a year, we go to a representative, I think it's over 2,000 residents we go to 3 times a year to ask. And one of the things that's important about that is we don't just do the survey and then stop. What we do is we look for changes and we look for geographical differences or community differences, and then we follow up 2 weeks later with focus groups. And one of the things we've noticed actually is in the geographical position, the southeast part of the borough, which is Leytonstone, we've seen less satisfaction, and we've seen more issues-based things and more of the hot topics around there. So we're doing much more focus, not just with focus groups, but with our services to see how we can unpick that and see where the big issues are. So we don't just sit on the satisfaction data and pat ourselves on the back. We look at where the issues are and try and do a lot more data and work with services to see what the issues are.